I read that you had your own childhood struggles, and that has really caused for your passion reaching back and preparing the next generation of leaders. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if there was these pivotal things or pivotal points in our life that are life changing, and so if I could go back to one thing that really kind of changed my trajectory, it was a time where I had gotten fired from this job. I worked for U-Haul, had worked for there for a number of years, and had gotten this job working for a company called Airborne Express. And, Airborne Express, I don't even know, they're DHL now, but they're, delivery service like FedEx, man. I remember I got this job, and typically they give you a route in the area that you live in because, they want to kind of make sure that you're familiar with the area that you're delivering to. And when I got the job, they put me in this side of town, which was, real foreign to me. So I lived on the west side of town. That was kind of the hood, that's where the low income, where you lived at. And so they put me on this east side of town. The east side was much more affluent part of Orlando. And this is all in Orlando. It was much more affluent. You had a lot of major corporations on that side of town. And so I remember, man, when they gave me that route, I had a real bad attitude about it. I said, man, if you just put me on the side of town where I'm familiar with, man, I could do a much better job. I know that area, right? That was my comfort zone, right? And so they said, well, either you work this east side or you find a new job. And so for the first 2 weeks on the job, man, I had a real poor attitude, just was not happy. I wasn't getting my way. And so just had this, this real bad attitude. And so 2 weeks into the job, man, I pull up at this house, and most of the deliveries I was doing were to people's homes. This was, maybe 1995 or so, 96, right? So this is before, delivery and before Amazon became, so big. So, all of these people were getting packages delivered to their houses, and that was foreign to me in itself. And so 2 weeks on the job, man, I pulled up at this house, and it's the largest house I had ever seen in my life, and it wasn't even really a big house, but at the time, I'm coming from, shotgun houses and apartment complexes and things like that. And so, I mean, I looked at this house and I was like, man, this is a beautiful house. And so I walked up to the door and I rung the doorbell, man. And usually we know how the delivery drivers do, you run up to the door, throw the package at the front door, ring the doorbell, and take off running, right? And that's usually what you do, right? But this particular day, man, I don't know. It was just something that was overcoming me, man. And so I stood there, rung the doorbell, stood there, and a gentleman answered the door, and it was, maybe like 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And he answered the door, and I said, man, my name is Jay, and I'm your new delivery driver. And I'm just curious, I've never seen a house this beautiful. And I was just wondering, what do you do for a living, man? Cause I was like, how do you live like this? I've never seen this. And so he was actually generous. He said, well, I run a business from my home. And I was like, well, you run a business from your home? And I said, so you're trying to tell me, like, at the time when it first started, the conversation first started, I'm shaking, and got the package in my hand shaking because I don't know what to expect. But then I got a little more bold, and I'm like, what do you mean you run a business from your home? And he said, well, I run a business from my home. And he actually let me in, showed me a look around into his office. And as I think about it, it's kind of crazy now, but at the time, man, I was like, so you're trying to tell me you don't wake up in the morning dreading the job that you don't like, fighting traffic to go and work with people you don't like working with, doing something you don't like doing, and then getting off and, counting down the clock to get off, and then go through this rat race all over again every single day, 5 days a week. Just trying to tell me you don't go through that, because that's all I had ever seen, right? And I'm looking at my parents, and he said, no, I love what I do. And I'll tell you, that was the day that the entrepreneurial seed was planted in my head. And it also was the day that my mind was expanded. And I had to step out of my comfort zone, right? I had to be forced out of my comfort zone. I didn't step out of it, voluntarily. I had to be forced out of it. But that exposed me that exposure, really changed my life, because from that point on, my attitude changed so I could look at things from a different perspective. And I began asking the supervisor there, hey, man, I'm open to delivering, and working on weekends to deliver to other areas that I'm not familiar with. Right. And that was the first time I ever set foot on a college campus, because I was delivering packages there. First time delivering package to the Lockheed Martin, which is, we know is a, big defense contractor. So just being on that campus. And so, just that changed my life, man. And that's when I realized, man, we have the power to control our destiny.